everyone. Today I want to officially showcase my concepts of a Portland-Vancouver Metropolitan Area metro network. Obviously, as always with my concepts for rail lines and things like this, it is entirely conceptual, therefore I try to do as much balancing as I can between utopian ideas and, of course, actual realism. And in this case, because it's the US, pretty much nothing like this will probably ever happen just about anywhere, but we could hope and imagine. So really quickly, just for context, the key here for the coloration is simple. Yellow means grade or ground level. Green is a transition track, basically transitioning between, say, tunnels, viaducts. So orange is for tunnels, purple is indicating aerial, so viaduct. So some of these, unfortunately, because again, it's the US, everything's already pre-developed, requires us to have to do complete in nothing but tunnels. Like this line that I had, that I figured made the most sense, to connect St. John's with Oregon City. It's an entire east side of the Willamette line. I figured that made by far the most sense. And as you can see, the interfacing area, the main one, or main two, I should say, one is the Rose Quarter Transit Center. I actually decided that it made sense to put it there rather than having to deal with tunneling or bridging through the river, which, of course, because of all the development, does not make any sense. So downtown, Union Station, all that doesn't really work. Plus, the locality of Rose Quarter Transit Center, and thus the Rose Quarter / Lloyd District, is phenomenal for the Portland area. It's about as central as you're going to get as well for the population base and where everybody travels through. So this makes perfect sense to put an underground transit center for these rail lines, these metro lines, right here underneath I-5, and of course underneath the green spaces and such between the roadways and Interstate 5. This obviously is the Rose Garden. I refuse to call it the current branding. Memorial Coliseum, Convention Center, Lloyd Center. That's the main interface for the central city area. And then this up here is, of course, PDX, Portland International Airport. This would also be a space for a heavy amount of intermodality between not just the metro lines, but obviously MAX and the TriMet bus network. And also CTRAN, technically. I believe CTRAN runs at least one, if not a couple of lines to PDX as well, which of course is Clark County up here in the Vancouver area. So, without further ado, allow me to showcase the individual lines. If you want to actually see me in live time, pretty much, conceptualize and come up with the first line, which is the one that connects the Rose Quarter with downtown Vancouver, I'll put it up on the screen. That is where you can watch it. It's already on my channel. Yeah, so let's get underway with it. Let's go for the Rose Quarter PDX line. So this one is going to be very similar, obviously, to both the red line and the green line for a bit, and even part of the blue line, because it's going to generally focus and follow Interstate 84, I-84, and then go up through here and into PDX. It's a short line, but it's an express line, and it's one that I feel like should be added as yet another option for people outside of merely trying to take either bus services or MAX, or of course ride shares or whatever else. So of course we have the Rose Quarter Transit Center intermodal system over here, passes underneath the Convention Center. The next stop would be at Laurelhurst / Hollywood. Same over here would be another Laurelhurst Hollywood area. Then you would have another one right here that curves. So it would be a curve station underneath, of course, the freeway. And then, of course, we would have another one up here on Sandy Boulevard. And finally, of course, we'd have the one in PDX. So it's just a very short line with very few stops. But again, that's the kind of the point, is to make that nice little intermedium between the buses, the MAX light rail, and now, of course, metro line. So it's a very quick trip. And obviously being able to directly connect via either PDX or the Rose Quarter Transit Center is imperative, because that means on both sides of the Vancouver metro area, you get to directly make only one transfer from either line to directly connect to PDX. And in fact, it's the same thing with the Sunset Highway line. There's 26 line that we'll see a little bit later. So here we have PDX East Vancouver, of course, and this one goes directly up into Salmon Creek. You have the massive intermodal PDX metro station to its next stop, which would be just north of the state route that runs along the river. And basically, you just have through each of the neighborhoods, you know, fourth plane, fifth plane, everything else, you'd have your stops. So you have your stop there. And naturally, you'd eventually have your stops all the way up and into Salmon Creek. So originally I had it stop just here. This was a compromise station because the main area for Salmon Creek that everybody actually usually anywhere in the Portland metro is trying to access is this central area around the park. I mean, that's the only reason why I ever grew up knowing of Salmon Creek is literally for the park. We had field trips there multiple times. And of course, it's also pretty rapidly developing in this general vicinity. They're trying to densify it. They're trying to add just more general development in general. So I mean, it's very nice. So it's a good little compromise station. But logistically, you'd think that the transit center wouldn't be here because this is clearly, as you can see, tell this is Salmon Creek Transit Center, and of course it's just for buses, which is cool and all. But it's kind of in a weird spot. It's a little isolated. It's on the north edge of the development pattern. It's just in a weird spot, as you can tell, especially considering much more of the development and where people live and where people are going to interact in the Salmon Creek region are obviously, it's going to be to the south. It's going to be down here. But also, you want to encourage more people who drive to stop off and visit. I guess there's a transit center here too. I didn't even recognize. I didn't realize this was a transit center here as well. You have these two different transit centers, I guess. That one's way more centrally located. It makes a lot more sense. This one is just really in a shit spot. Even if you develop all of this land into a much denser land use, even this, it's in just a awkward spot. Clearly, in fact, this is the street you should be off of because it's technically a major road that interconnects both sides of the freeway system and everything. So I don't understand why the heck they chose this road. Plus, it should be at least slightly more central, so why not put it here? This is a perfect place for it. It's perfect land use. Everything about it's exactly as you'd want it. It's absolutely perfect. So I don't get why they put it there rather than here. And that makes it extremely awkward for people to be able to use it. But I still compromised on it and decided that as many routes as possible, which really is just two, should be able to directly connect to the Clark County Fairgrounds / what I like to call the Ridgefield Amphitheater, because obviously it's an amphitheater in Ridgefield. And it's going to keep rebranding. It's already had like 3 or 4 different brand names since its inception, not all that long ago. So this definitely necessarily should just be called Ridgefield Amphitheater Metro Station here, so that way this line for East Vancouver can directly connect in. So the East Vancouver side of things can access it. And even people directly from PDX, which is what I call just simply the Ridgefield line. As you can see, this one goes from that northerly downtown transit station or metro station. It directly swerves in to connect up on, that's why it's so broad, is because this way it can literally connect this way and going north, and then it can connect back going south, which I think makes a lot of sense. You might think it's redundant because of this, and that's kind of the point. You want to have that little extra redundancy so that way you don't just like have overcrowding with people trying to transfer between them. Plus, there's another line, of course, that serves the south end of the Vancouver portion of the metro area that therefore means that it's split between the demand for this, or rather for this station down here, and of course this station up in Salmon Creek for people to interchange between depending on where they want to get to along these metro lines or nearby them. So this one is going to stop off and curve off over here in at the actual transit center, really underneath and right next to the transit center, the North Salmon Creek Transit Center, just the Salmon Creek Transit Center, and obviously stop after that in Ridgefield at the amphitheater. These two would actually share a tunnel, by the way, for a while. So it would be probably a wide single bore is my idea to try to save costs and environmental impact. And then eventually, of course, it would have to start splitting off, and then you'd have to do 2 different bores. So that way you can serve the actual transit center up here. And again, because of this being a transit center, and it's a decent sized one, it has spots for, I believe, at least 4 bus lines, if not upwards of 8. So a potential expansion actually on this side. So it's actually quite perfect for having that extra stop in between the 2 different interactions between the East Vancouver and this Ridgefield connector line, because this further takes more demand off of the 2 different switch points here and down in south, down in the Vancouver waterfront station, and of course Ridgefield, because now people can transfer directly to these bus lines, or if they live in these areas and they'd rather walk the short distance, say, to these apartments or these ones, which is probably at most maybe a mile away, they can. And it just takes a lot more demand off of the transferring that people might do between the lines at these other stations. So overcrowding gets reduced. Now, obviously the next station south is going to be here, because again, a lot of development, and I hemmed and hawed quite a while about putting a station there, because I also put one right here, because that also makes a lot of sense, and it's north of where the development kind of starts to stutter or stall because of I-5 crossing and the creeks. So I put one there initially, and then eventually I'm like, well, we obviously need to have one where more of the actual proper development and current redevelopments are happening, the new developments that are much denser, so that way everybody in these areas has yet another option. And plus, other bus lines allow people to directly connect. And these 2 are relatively close to this other transit center. So this one is actually really close to that one. So it's a short walk, or just probably a single stop away from this transit center via the bus lines. So that works very, very well. On the south side of I-5, after it crosses, there's another station here, and then of course we get to where the start of it is, which is of course on a different line this stop is, but there's the north downtown Vancouver, just downtown Vancouver stop, and of course you have the waterfront stop right here. Washougal Vancouver line. This is the last one I made. So these 2 lines are these 2 lines share the waterfront station. This is going to pretty much start or end there. Curve its way around Fort Vancouver, because I'm sure they don't want you tunneling directly underneath it, because it's a historic site. So there's a station here over, which is basically Fort Vancouver. We have another station right here, of course. Then we got the station right here, and this is technically a transfer station. So this station is crossing like this, either above or underneath the East Vancouver station that connects PDX to Salmon Creek and the Ridgefield Amphitheater, which that station looks like this, and a transfer station, so you can transfer between the 2 lines if you wish or you need to. And the next one is going to be here. A load of new development that's set to just go up in here. So that's another reason why this station feels really good to have, for that reason. As you can see, a bunch down here, which is another reason why I put them, even though they're close together, like that. Because obviously these new developments in all these different places and people and density, they're going to need even more transit options. So naturally I put that there. And then the next station we have is the Camas station, downtown Camas. I figured this is a good place to redevelop, so you might as well, if you want to revitalize and redevelop, maybe even start to densify Camas a bit so you're not sprawling so much. This is a great place to put it. It actually looks like they might be trying to redevelop this anyway, because you can tell they destroyed a bunch of old stuff here. So I think that just the idea is they're going to develop it. And then I put 2 stations in Washougal. And the reason why is because of all the new development happening down here, and redevelopment and repurposing of land down here in just south of downtown Washougal. And obviously this gives you ability, since it's on technically both sides of the freeway, to directly connect to this road, so that you can walk through these areas and get to and from your homes or your park or whatever else, or even up through here via getting on and off a ramp right here, to be able to then connect to this road end and connect you up to enable you to obviously get into downtown Washougal and these different areas. And then, of course, the last stop is in East Washougal over here, because you want to try to connect up, of course, as much of the area as possible. And a place like Washougal, like this, and the way it kind of is spread and sprawls, it makes sense to give them 2 stations despite their low population. And plus, if you look elsewhere in the world, in Europe, this as a metro line does actually make a lot of sense, because other places in the world shows that even with low development and low populations, a lot of people will come to use these kinds of lines. And plus, with the direct transfer to the PDX East Vancouver line, or basically the one that goes to Salmon Creek and eventually to the amphitheater up here in Ridgefield, that's definitely going to see a lot of use, I think, by people adopting it over here as a really quick trip to be able to get to PDX, rather than having to worry about traffic jams and bridges and bridge lifting problems and reconstruction and everything else. And I-5 and I-205, but especially I-5, is an absolute nightmare to try to ever cross literally any time of day, unless you're like literally in the middle of the night. It's absolutely brutal. You know, to go the 56 miles from, say, where I live over in here to, which is pretty much a straight shot actually, directly to the amphitheater, it takes an average of about 3.5 hours, even if you try to leave early, so that you don't like miss some of the concert, which is brutal. It absolutely sucks. If you want to get into Washington from Oregon, you have to use one of the two. If you want to get between from Washington to the Portland area, again, you have to. Otherwise, you have to go all the way up here to Rainier/Longview, the Longview Bridge, which, if you can't tell, is slightly closer to Astoria than it actually is the damn edge of the Portland Metro. So that's not really a logical choice and option, because then you have to circumvent, especially if you're trying to get to the amphitheater in Ridgefield, which is right here, or anywhere in the actual Vancouver portion of the area. You literally have to go like around 100 extra miles just to get there and try to bypass the traffic jams. Or you have to go all the way to the Bonneville Dam and cross at the dam. Those are your only 2 options. You either got to go all the way over here, or you got to go all the way up here. Otherwise, you are fucked, and you have to use these 2. It's a total mess and a choke point. We need a lot more options. That's why I still believe the ferry option is by far the best alternative, in the sense of, give us a ferry as well. Don't do light rail. Do a metro line if you're going to cross the river. Make it on its own right of way, the entire way, obviously. Make sure it's high frequency, it's high capacity at all times. It doesn't cut service on holidays or on Sundays or Saturdays, so that people can cross the river, and give it to both sides. That way you can go by car, you can go by bus, you can go by Amtrak, you can go by Metro line across the river as well. And that gives you all those options, plus ferry. It gives people yet another option to be able to use, in this case, what would be called the Frog Ferry, to be able to hop between Portland and Vancouver. Even if it's just literally from downtown Portland, the east side around the Rose Quarter District, or the Pearl District to downtown Vancouver, it's perfect to be able to give people that option, so that way you have multiple choices, and they'd all be different prices too. The more modes and the more choices you give people, the better things will get. Now let's do Clackamas PDX. So if you want to get, say, from Salmon Creek down to Clackamas or Lentz or something like that, you can, just by making a quick transfer at PDX to this line. This is like a much more express and better, so superior version of the Green Line. Some of these obviously are basically just alternatives of what we should have been fucking made. Instead of max light rail, we should have made actual entirely grade separated metro lines. That would make sense. And so this is basically a reduxed version of the Green Line, a vastly improved version of the Green Line that's much more rapid, much more consistent, frequent, higher capacity, and therefore much more viable of an option. Again, you could still use the Green Line. It wouldn't make it obsolete. You'd still be able to do that, and it would still be just up to people's decisions and choices. And actually, technically, it's a combination of the Green Line and the Red Line, to be fair, because obviously you have the transfer station of the max between the green and the red, which I believe is right here, and then you just kind of follow the red after that into PDX. So This is the length of the line, obviously, between Clackamas Town Center Transit Center, or Clackamas Transit Center, and PDX. Obviously, as we've seen, the PDX station is pretty much the entire main terminal. Another stop right here. I feel like that makes a lot of sense, at least for one line to make a stop in these shopping districts, because it also can focus kind of like an air train, so to speak, right? So it can really quickly get people to hop on a very high capacity rapid transit use. They can hop on straight from the terminal, straight from the airport to get to their car, or vice versa to get back. So that works in that way. Or if they're international travelers or somebody who just wants to pop into one of these stores, I'm assuming there's probably some duty frees in here, since it's not actually in the airport itself. You could go into here and get a snack, some food, a drink, extra suitcase if you need it, because maybe somehow a zipper busted or something. You can go do that. You have all this different stuff like that. Obviously, it also gives direct access to employees. So people who don't necessarily work in the airport, but they work in these businesses, now they have a rapid and quick option to be able to access these businesses in this area. And they don't have to use the damn freeways or these other log jams to be able to access it. Next up, we have the actual transit center that already exists. You would go here. This is where you would transfer from the green and red lines, and blue line actually. And you go and you'd be able to access those here via this transit center amongst plenty of bus lines. So obviously a stop has to go there. A stop right here, north of Lentz. I believe this is Kelly Butte. And then you'd have one, this is Lentz proper right here. And I opted to put the transit center, or the station right here instead. And this is actually, I believe, the where the Clackamas Transit Center is. And then I have decided to put one down here, and the main like employment center of Clackamas as well. From there, we'll jump to the St. John's Oregon City line. The main population base and everything, working base of Oregon City, is all way south of what everybody calls and considers Oregon City. So realistically, Oregon City needs a lot more options when it comes down to proper transit. And I figure a good start is to not just service downtown, but also to, of course, serve the main population basins of Oregon City, especially considering all of this area keeps getting further and further sprawled out and more developed. As you can see, there's even apartments going in here, which is weird because it's more dense than the rest of the development of Oregon City in the south end, and it's on the edge of the town. So this is a great concept and idea. As you can tell, they're still developing more stuff out here. And again, if you do like high capacity, high frequency, really high quality transit, like a metro, that should help better induce transit-oriented development and demand all around the area and densify and upzone a lot of the development that's already there, and basically hurt the temptation to sprawl instead to build your housing. So this is why I put a station all the way down here, and another one right here, more in the central portion of the developed area of Oregon City. And then obviously we have the next one in downtown right here. And then we have the next one in Gladstone. The next one up here around Johnson City / Milwaukee area. This is actually Milwaukee proper. We have another one here. Another one here. What is this, by the way? Oh, this is actually Milwaukee up here, apparently. Still. And then we have one here. And again, I don't remember the name of all the different neighborhoods. This is another one, South Portland, obviously. Another one, South Portland, but this one directly across the bridges from downtown, which this area has been rapidly redeveloping and densifying as well, especially closer to I-84. Obviously, the Rose Quarter Transit Center. And I believe I put another one in Boise. And then we got, of course, a stop or two in Swan Island. It was just the one. Yep. And then another one outside of Portland, University of Portland, in the Chile Center, or Chile Center, technically. And then another one up here in St. John's. And then, of course, the actual modern downtown of St. John's. So that would be the St. John's Oregon City line, or basically just the East Portland Express, if you will. EPAX, EPAX. EPAX works perfectly for branding actually as well. So we'll call it that. Then let's go with, since we were in St. John's there, let's go with the St. John's Troutdale. This is like an alternative to the Blue Line for the more northern portions of the Portland Metro, on the Oregon side, of course. So again, we have a stop here in downtown St. Johnny Boys. We're going to skip over because it was really difficult to choose the spacing for the stops. So this is the next one right here. This would be so much more. I'd feel better about how this video is kind of turning out if I remembered and knew the damn names of the districts, but I just don't. There's a chance some of these I did just go to Google Maps proper just to look and give them actual names. Yeah. So University Park, Kenton Piedmont, Humboldt Vernon. So this is Humboldt Vernon. So that last one was Kenton Piedmont. So yeah, Concordia Northeast, which I didn't remember being that far away either. It's been a long time actually since I made these, so this is why I'm having a hard time with it. This is Concordia Northeast. You also have the PDX station, obviously, right here. There's the next one. Russell Hazelwood, right here. Another station right here, which is what? One I did not name. Of course not. Wilkes East, because again, you want the ability for people to have easier access to these areas. This one is obviously Rockwood, and I've been past here recently on the Max line, and it is even more developed already than it's showing currently. There's a surprising amount more density in here than they're already showing here. This is North Central Gresham, Troutdale proper, of course. Then we got North Troutdale, and of course, then you got Troutdale Airport. Troutdale Airport is actually a focus city for FedEx operations. So FedEx runs a huge operation out of Troutdale. That's where almost all of their flights go into and from. So realistically, I actually think that this makes a lot of sense as a commercial airport, but specifically for commercial or warehousing purposes. That again, since it's such a big workplace in this region, distribution centers are all throughout here based at Troutdale, that this needs to stop as well. So because it's such a major employer, that one, and then of course you got the two pieces of Troutdale. And obviously the Max line is right here, and that's your last major interaction with it before you have your stops going down through here, along with, of course, the Powell Boulevard division and all the other different bus lines that run east-west throughout here and some north-south as well. So that's the St. John's Troutdale line, which again, I believe makes a ton of sense to be able to conceive would be a very viable and logical line. But yeah, so that is the entire metro network concept for the Portland-Vancouver metropolitan area. I love this concept. I think it's very viable. It could easily work. And admittedly, I know there's probably going to be people that are going to be like, well, what about, say, a line that would connect the entire east-west side again? That would be, again, a better alternative, a more efficient, fast, quick, less stop alternative that'd be entirely grade separated to either replace, because it probably should be replaced, or at the very least to give an alternative to the blue line. Obviously, the idea would be that you'd want it to go all the way into Forest Grove. Not just Corntown, but Forest Grove, and not just Hillsborough, but Forest Grove. So Forest Grove, Corntown, Hillsborough, Reedville, and Aloha. It should be like right here. Then Aloha proper, probably. Then obviously, probably East Aloha, downtown Beaverton, East Beaverton, Raleigh Hills, Multnomah Village area, South Waterfront, downtown. You get the rest of the idea. Why not do that? Well, because in my idea, though it would work perfectly as a metro line, and it's still an option that I could do and I could theorize. I could even make a video that was coming up with what that might look like and what it would probably work as. I think that works better as a local/regional rail line than anything. And I think regional rail is the answer there. So true heavy, still high capacity, still higher speed, entirely grade separated rail, I think is the correct decision for that, because it's quite the long distance. And to do that both ways, I think it needs to definitely be an actual rail line, a true rail line, not a light rail, not a metro, not a subway. And obviously I have that video probably coming on down the line pretty soon too, is basically an Oregon concept for just Oregon for the regional intercity and intercity express rail networks that I think should exist at least for the valley. Because obviously geographically and everything, it's going to be way too expensive and very difficult to justify connecting, say, to the coast, let alone, say, to, oh, I don't know, Bend and Redmond. It's going to be very brutally difficult to pull that off logistically when you have to deal with all the weather and the geographic, geographicness and topography and everything. It's going to be brutal. But yeah, so anticipate that coming at some point in the future, that video on a concept of like an Oregon rail network. I also think that, I know eventually I'm going to also have the concept that isn't the Cascadia ultra high speed rail line concept. That, by the way, there's that video as well. I'm going to have it linked in the description. And in fact, I'll just probably link straight up the playlist for transit in my slash urbanism in my pin comment and in the description of this video instead. Intercity Express version, Cascadia high-speed rail. So much slower version, still much faster than, say, normal intercity or regional. But it would allow you to be able to interconnect with more cities while still being very quick, very express throughout the system. And then, of course, an actual intercity slash regional, you sort of consider them the same thing, that it would obviously be split into sections, so different lines that would serve technically the same general line, because at that point it's too slow and too many cities served to not be able to take certain trains off and crews off and switch to a different train to then connect you further north or south. That would connect you to even more of the cities in the region. And I think that that's where the most interesting and fun aspect of this is going to come, because that goes into the intercity networks. And if I have Oregon down, then at that point, all I can do is separate it into segments to where I can do Washington after that, slash BC. And I think that that's going to be an extremely fun concept. That said, thank you so much for watching this video. This is going to be a mess to be able to, for me to edit. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the concepts and the ideas that I have here for this metro network. I think it would be conceivable that you could actually be able to pull this off feasibly. I think it would make sense, these different lines and everything. Yeah, I could also see equal argument against it, but ultimately, I believe that this is a great concept, and I wish that this is something that the Portland-Vancouver metro area actually had, and that we had the political will and money to be able to pretty much kick the state into high gear to get them to do this while also supporting Cascadia Ultra high-speed rail. That said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in whatever the hell my next video is going to be, because I don't know what the hell it's going to be. All right, bye-bye.